before I start, the other day on Friday, Adnan gave me a coin as a gift, as a sign of friendship for here, and so I want to return a gift to him. I'm giving him a copy of my book. I'll tell you why I've given him this particular one later on, but it's very important. So our topic today is who is Muhammad? I'll start with a comment on the sources that I'm going to use for my talk. And you would not believe this, my computer has frozen. It's working, all right. Oh. Okay. All right, so the sources that we're going to look at, the first one that we'll use is the Quran. According to Muslims, the Quran is the earliest Muslim document, but it's actually a poor source for information about Muhammad. It lacks details, places, names, dates, contexts, anything about Muhammad's period. Muhammad, in fact, is named only 4 times in the whole of the Quran, and sorry. Again. It's frozen again. Thank you. All right. 4 times in the Quran. Mecca is only named twice in the Hadith. Sorry, in the Quran. The second, so we need to look elsewhere for details about Muhammad. The second source I'm going to use is the first full biography or seerah of Muhammad, which is written by a guy called Ibn Ishaq, who died 135 years after Muhammad, and it was edited by Ibn Hisham, who died 200 years after Muhammad. We don't have the copies of the original Ishaq's book, only Ibn Hisham's censored redaction of it. I'll be referring to the hadith compiled by al-Bukhari and Muslim, and these were written 220, 240 years after Muhammad died. And my fourth source is the Tabari's Tarikh, or history, and he died nearly 300 years after Muhammad. These are quite late sources from a historical perspective. They're the best ones that we have, but this isn't relating to the sources. I'm assuming that these documents are an accurate history of the life of Muhammad. I've written 3 books which strongly feature Muhammad. The first one, called Understanding Jesus and Muhammad, seeks to maintain a balance between the 2 personalities, between Jesus and Muhammad. The second one, is the one I gave Adnan, is called Engaging Islamic Traditions, is very affirming of Muhammad. It has a chapter called Positive Aspects of Muhammad's Life, 25 pages long. Another one called The Positive Treatment and Depiction of Women, 12 pages long. It presents a very optimistic view about Muhammad. The third one, called Challenging Islamic Traditions, is more critical of Muhammad. And Adnan, I'm sure, will give a more positive perspective on Muhammad's life than I'm going to give. But today I'll be drawing from the first and the third books. My intention is not to insult anyone or to upset anyone, but only to inform you about what the earliest documents have told us. And if I fail, I apologise in advance. Let's go through with some history. Muhammad, according to Muslims, was born in Mecca in about 570 AD. His father, Abdullah, died before he was born. His mother's name was Amina, and she died when he was 6 years old. So he was an orphan from childhood. He was brought up by his uncle Abu Talib. As a child, he worked as as a shepherd, and later became a trader, leading camel caravans from Mecca up to Damascus. He had a good reputation, and he was called El Amin, the faithful one, or the reliable or honest one. At age 25, he was proposed to by Khadija. Now, she was 40 years old, and the age gap was enough in Arab culture at that time for her to be his mother. She had been married twice before. She was wealthy and powerful. In fact, she owned the international trading company that Muhammad worked for. So Muhammad married the boss. He didn't have to work anymore, so he went on a spiritual quest. The Arabs at that time were idol worshippers, and they worshipped at the black shrine called the Kaaba, which is in the centre of Mecca. It's still there today. At that time, it housed 360 idols in and around. It was a bit like the Greek pantheon. The Arabs were a polytheistic people. But Muhammad wasn't happy with this, and he took to fasting in Ramadan and meditating in a cave outside Mecca on Mount Hira. Here's a picture of it. It was a pagan custom called tahannuth. And one night, when he was about 40 years old, he was asleep in the cave, and a being appeared in his dream and showed him a piece of fabric with some writing written on it. And this being ordered Muhammad to do something he couldn't do, to read. Muhammad was illiterate. And the being kept ordering him to read, and grabbed him and squeezed him so tightly that Muhammad thought he was going to die, to suffocate from this. The being then recited the verse that was written on the fabric, and Muhammad repeated it after him, and you can see it up there. The first passage of the Quran was revealed to Muhammad. And then Muhammad woke up from this, what was a pretty scary nightmare. He thought that he had encountered a demon, and he ran screaming to his wife saying, "Cover me, cover me." And she did. Khadija wrapped him up in a blanket, left him shivering there, and she went to visit her cousin, a man named Waraka bin Nawfal, who was a Christian, and told him about what Muhammad had told her. And Waraka said, that being was an angel, it wasn't a demon. And then Waraka died a few days later. No more revelations came for another 3 years, and Muhammad became very depressed. And Khadija said to him, "I think your Lord must have come to hate you." Muhammad tried to commit suicide by throwing himself off a high mountain, but the being then reappeared in front of him and identified himself as the angel Gabriel. And so Muhammad was reassured that time, but several other times he went and attempted to commit suicide. Initially, Muhammad only told family and friends about his dream, and eventually he was threatened with violence by Allah if he didn't start to preach publicly. And so he went out into the streets of Mecca and started preaching, telling people publicly what he had seen and heard. Well, it didn't go too well. For 12 years, from 610 to 622, Muhammad presented the message of Islam as a peaceful preacher. He told the Meccans to turn away from their false idols and to worship only Allah, the Arab high god. So the Arabs already knew about Allah. The result was only about 200 followers out of a city of estimated population of 30,000. So only about 1% of the population chose to follow him. And there was a lot of persecution, both for Muhammad himself, but also for his followers. Some were killed. In 621, he received, so by this time he's 51 years old, he's received an invitation from some people in Yathrib, a city to the north, which was later renamed Medina. And the following year he left Mecca in a migration called the Hijra, and the Muslims left with him and they settled in this new city. Whereas Muhammad had been peaceful in Mecca, he now received a new revelation from Allah that he could use violence to wreak vengeance on the Meccans, to gain wealth and also to spread Islam. Once he had settled in Medina, he had political power and he had military capabilities. And so he used them both. He sent his troops out on, he went out on 28 military campaigns himself called a Ghazwa, and then ordered his troops to take part in another 50 others called a Sariya. So on average, there was an Islamic attack somewhere on the Arabian Peninsula every 6 weeks or so in the last 10 years of Muhammad's life. He engaged in this until his death in 632 AD, when he died at age 62 or 63. He's buried in Medina and his grave is still there today. So readers of the Quran are told, you have a good example in God's messenger. And he presented himself as the best one to follow. He said, "By Allah, I fear Allah more than you do. I'm more obedient to him than you." He said, "He who does not follow my tradition in religion is not from me," not one of my followers. Sorry. He said, "What is wrong with such people as refrain from doing the thing I do? By Allah, I know Allah better than they, and I am more afraid of him than they." So he puts himself out there as the best model for someone following Allah. He also presented himself as preeminent in the world, the universal prophet. He said, "Every nation used to be sent to his nation only, but I have been sent to all mankind." He claimed absolute geographical sovereignty. He said, "The earth belongs to Allah and to his apostle." He thought this gave him universal responsibility. He said, "Allah has trusted all the people of the earth to me." So clearly Muhammad thought of himself and is described as the best example of humanity and as the final prophet for the whole world. It won't come as a surprise to you that I don't believe either of those claims. I've been studying Islam for over 40 years, and I would have become a Muslim many years ago if I believed this. I've lived in Muslim countries, I've seen and faced Islam. And based on what I'm going to say now, you'll understand why I haven't made that decision. We're going to look at 10 aspects of Muhammad's life, and these raise serious questions about him. And they're listed there: his moral character, his military history, his treatment of enemies, his involvement with slavery, his treatment of women and children and the handicapped, what he said on his deathbed, his final destiny, and his inability to save anyone. Some Muslims claim that Muhammad was a perfect human being, but he was actually quite open about his own faults. He said, "I seek forgiveness from Allah 100 times a day." Al-Bukhari, he says 70 times a day. And he wasn't just being humble, because the Quran in the Quran, Allah tells him 5 times, seek forgiveness for your sin. So, istaghfar li dhanbika. It's your personal sin. And Muhammad responded by praying, "Oh Allah, forgive me my sins, what that I did in the past or will do in the future, the things I did in secret or in public." So he has all the bases covered there. It's clear from these passages that Muhammad never was and never claimed to be sinless. He needed God's forgiveness just like you and I do. An imperfect person cannot be a perfect model for all humanity. And all of this information, by the way, we've got to stand up the back with the brochures on it. It's written up in my books, or you can get it from my website. Everything is referenced from the earliest Islamic sources. Muhammad lived in violent times. As his troops attacked village after village, as I mentioned before, they pillaged the wealth, taking gold and silver and camels and sheep as booty. And here's a list of the military campaigns that Muhammad was, actually can't see it very well, that Muhammad was involved in, but there's sources for those. His followers killed and enslaved and mistreated many of those they captured. As an example, in the town of Khaybar, a Jewish man named Kanana bin Arabiya was the keeper of the town's treasure. And Muhammad gave orders about him, saying, torture him until you root out and extract what he has, that is, where the treasure is hidden. And so Zubair kindled a fire on Kanana's chest, twirling it with his fire stick until Kanana was near death. And then the messenger gave him to Maslama, who beheaded him. That night, Muhammad had sexual relations with Kanana's widow, Safiya, and he said, "I have been made victorious through terror." So there's details there about Muhammad's sayings about jihad as well. When people tried to oppose Muhammad because of his violent actions and his claim to be a prophet, he often treated them badly. An example, Asma, the daughter of Marwan, was the mother of 5 small children. She had composed a poem against Muhammad, and he stood up in the mosque and said, "Who will rid me of Marwan's daughter?" And Umayr bin Uday al-Khatami went to her house that night when she was asleep, and he removed the infant from her breast and stabbed her to death. And then he reported this to Muhammad, who said, "You have helped Allah and his apostle." Asma was just one of many, and the list is there on the right-hand side, of people that Muhammad ordered to be killed for opposing him. there were many who were taken out by his death squads. All of this again recorded in Islamic sources. In Medina, for example, every Jew that was there when Muhammad arrived was either expelled, enslaved, or executed within 5 years of Muhammad arriving in the city. Slavery was widely practiced amongst the Arabs. The Quran taught that freeing slaves was a virtuous act, and Muhammad did free his slave, Zayd bin Haritha, and actually adopted him as a son because Muhammad's sons had died as babies. He had no heir. And this was before Muhammad became a prophet. After he became a prophet at age 40, he continued to acquire slaves, up to 40 of them, and we have the names of them listed there. His men captured many more, and thousands were enslaved because of Muhammad. We see there he also sold slaves for other people, and he ordered some of his female slaves to be flogged. Child marriage was apparently acceptable in Muhammad's time, and he practiced it. In Medina, he took Aisha, the daughter of his best friend, and it said the Prophet married her when she was 6 years old, and he consummated this marriage when she was 9 years old. And again, we've got earlier sources and the most reliable sources attesting to those dates. And the question is a 54-year-old man having sexual relations with a 9-year-old girl a perfect model for humanity? Muhammad also married 10 other women, although some Muslim scholars give a higher figure, and he was involved in violence against them. One night, Aisha, who by this time was a teenager, he died when she was 18, went outside the house without his permission. And she reported that when she came back, he struck me on the chest, which caused me pain. He ordered that other women be killed. The man accused his wife of adultery to Muhammad, and Muhammad said to one of his followers, "Go to the wife of this man, and if she confesses, stone her to death." And then Unais went to that woman the next morning. She confessed, and Muhammad ordered her to be stoned to death. These are just samples. There's many more that I could have drawn for this. Although Muhammad could be brave in battle, at other times he lacked courage and compassion. He advised his followers to run away from a leper as one runs away from a lion. He married a Kindite woman named Asma bint Nu'man, but discovered on the wedding night that she was suffering from leprosy, so he divorced her immediately. A more compassionate response might have been to keep the wedding promise, for better, for worse, in sickness and in health, and to care for this unfortunate woman in his own household. He already had 10 other wives. In the Quran, Muhammad is rebuked by Allah for frowning at and turning away from a blind man, Abdullah bin Maktoum, who had come to him seeking spiritual guidance. Muhammad was more interested in attending to a wealthy and powerful man, and so he didn't always show compassion to the disabled. Muhammad died lying in the lap of his favourite wife, Aisha. And at the last moment, Muhammad said, "May Allah curse the Jews and the Christians, for they built places of worship at the graves of their prophets." This was just one of many instances of Muhammad cursing people, and I've got a whole list there. There's dozens of them that you can see. These are all reported by Sahih al-Bukhari. Unfortunately, this would seem to disqualify Muhammad from being an intercessor or mediator on the final judgment. Abu Darda reported, "The Messenger of Allah said, 'Peace and blessings be upon those who curse others will not be intercessors or witnesses on the day of resurrection.'" And some Muslims hold out the hope that Allah will intercede for them on the day of judgment, but based on Muhammad's actions and his own words, he's not qualified to do that. There was something else that Muhammad experienced on his deathbed which raised questions about him. There's a verse in the Quran which says, "And if Muhammad had forged a false saying against us, that is Allah, we would certainly have cut off his aorta, and you could not have stopped us or withheld us from punishing him." Some people think that this prophecy was fulfilled on Muhammad's deathbed. Aisha reported that he used to say, "Oh Aisha, I feel the pain caused by the food I ate at Khaybar, and at this time I feel as if my aorta is being cut from that poison." The poison was from a Jewish woman who gave that to him because he had killed her family. Whether you believe with this connection or not, it's clear that Muhammad had no certainty about where he would end up. He said, "I don't know what's going to happen to me or to you." The Q, by the way, stands for Quran. He said, by Allah, even though I'm the apostle of Allah, I don't know what Allah will do to me or to you. He said, the good deeds of any person will not save anyone. They said, not even you, O Allah's apostle. He was supposed to be the best person who's ever lived. And he said, not even myself, unless Allah bestows his favour and mercy on me. So Muhammad, despite all his achievements and qualities, was never certain that he would go to paradise. So it's not surprising then that he could offer help, that he could not offer help to anyone else. He gave the following advice to his family and his followers. O people of Quraysh, that is his own tribe, buy or save yourselves from the hellfire, as I cannot save you from Allah's punishment. O Bani Abd Manaf, his own clan, I cannot save you from Allah's punishment. O Safiya, the aunt of Allah's apostle, I cannot save you from Allah's punishment. O Fatima, my own daughter, ask for me anything you want of my wealth, but I cannot save you from Allah's punishment. So, to conclude, it should be obvious why I don't think Muhammad is the best model for humanity to follow. He was conscious of his own flaws and shortcomings. If he thought he was more obedient to God than anyone else, he was clearly lacking in discernment, so he could not be a prophet. He wasn't the worst person to ever walk on the earth, but based on his own sayings, based on his actions, and the reports that we have of the earliest Islamic records, he was clearly not the best person. Thank you.